Out of the thousands of albums reviewed by Pitchfork Media, only 12 have been given a perfect score upon release. The very first of these was an EP titled Gay? Question mark? You can't find that review on the internet anymore, without an archive. Actually, most of Pitchfork's old reviews are deleted for various reasons, but right now I want to focus on the band behind this album, 12 Rods. Who are these guys anyway, and why was their material considered perfect to begin with? What made them so special, and why are they my favorite band of all time? Let's find out. Dream pop and shoegaze were in a cultural renaissance in the early 90s. Whether you're talking about seminal works from established bands, or curious little debuts from fresh faces, virtually no one was taking an L. The only problem was commercial success. For all of its beauty and respect in the independent scene, shoegaze was always considered too off-putting for everyone to understand. Dream pop was far more accessible sonically, but in terms of hit singles, you had a couple Cranberry songs. Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins definitely counts, but if it had nothing to do with grunge, it wouldn't have been as successful. I Love You Always Forever by Donna Lewis. I guess Fade Into You was almost a top 40 hit. And if we really want to stretch the definition of things, the Twin Peaks opening was pretty sick too. The point is, outside of Europe, even during these genres' peak of relevancy, good luck netting a wide audience in this field. Foreshadowing is a literary device. Now, despite what I just told you, 12 Rods were never just dream pop to begin with. They're a rock band first and foremost, but pinpointing what genre they are really depends on what song or album of theirs you're talking about. For example, 1993's Bliss. After going by Ryan's Big Head, also known as the greatest band name of all time, 4 kids from the small town of Oxford, Ohio, reformed under a new name. The 12 Rods in question actually refer to a Bible verse involving the 12 sons of Israel, mentioning structures that symbolize their authority, which may not mean much on its own, but like most things from the 90s, it sounds cool, so why not? And so does this album. The music here really does live up to the title. Now, since it was only distributed via cassette, this is the only record of theirs that's not on streaming services, but luckily there's a YouTube upload for those who are interested. Its lack of availability is precisely why it's the last record of theirs I listened to, and I was surprised at how early on these guys had nailed down their unique sound palette. Many of these songs hit quite hard. At points, it's the most aggressive sound they've ever pulled off, which makes sense given it's inspired by the most popular genre of music at the time, grunge. This aggression helps accentuate the pummeling drums of Chris McGuire the most. He seriously is one of the best drummers people don't talk enough about. Just listen to the intro to Stella, Day by Day, or the title track, and tell me that I'm over-exaggerating. Of course, not every track is balls-to-the-wall insanity, as deep cuts like Come Down on Me, Tell a Lie, and the fan favorite I Am Faster work more as introspective detours from the chaos. My only major gripe with this record is lead singer Ryan Olcott's vocal delivery, which can be excused most of the time considering he was just starting out, and incredibly young, but there are some off-key notes here and there that do manage to take me out of it just a bit. Apart from that, sure, it may not be the best written or most memorable record of theirs, but it's still a remarkable start to 12 Rod's creative streak. There's a lot of personality and originality on display here, which is exactly what you want out of a new emerging act. Shortly after the release of Bliss, the band relocated to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and subsequently began work on their follow-up EP, Gay? Recorded entirely in a basement. There are just 6 songs here. Don't let that fool you though, it's still a 40-minute record, a length that is rare for EPs, and I think it's one of the best things ever created by man. Move over, f***ing Galileo, I don't know. Yes, as much as I hate to say it, Pitchfork were right on the money with this one. Whether we're talking about the opener Red, which remains one of the best from its respective decade for how it acts as a sweeping introduction to the band itself, with a breakthrough of stellar ideas, tracks like Make Out Music or Game-O, that both feature this sense of intense longing, the kind you can only find in dream pop, to the pummeling drums of Mexico juxtaposed with its hazy synths, and the robust, hard-hitting 9-minute closer, Revolute, which is something straight out of the Hum playbook of writing power pop hooks with chunky metal riffs. Every single track goes incredibly hard and feels necessary to the overall experience, in a way that few albums, have achieved. And it's worth noting how striking the subject matter is. A lot of these songs touch on certain relationships in a very delicate manner, presenting them as equally tender, yet complex, with as few words as possible. A touchstone of alt-rock songwriting was just covering the whole thing in metaphors, but these never felt like just flavor to me. The vagueness adds a lot of nuance that was, for the most part, entirely absent from contemporary media portrayals of the LGBTQ. Obviously, these kinds of topics weren't taken as seriously back then, not necessarily frowned upon, but the general attitude being that it was a little bit out of the ordinary.
Mark's gay.
And you can argue that it's not as provocative as it thinks it is, that it's just some smarmy kids just out of college who think they're deeper than they actually are, but the music comes from a place of genuine sincerity and real-world experience with these issues. Whether it touch on hometown bullies or lack of fulfillment in your own identity, the desire to feel accepted for who you are, I think it's really important that Pitchfork covered it and regarded it so highly, as I consider the record an all-time favorite of mine, and the perfect score to be completely justified. The band, however, did not feel the same way. While they did appreciate the praise, they understandably found it a bit extreme. They didn't feel like they made a masterpiece. In their documentary, they actually get the original author to read his full review, and the tone is comedic in the sense that this is an awkward piece of writing to look back on. I mean, compared to modern Pitchfork reviews, it's basically a short blurb, with its language coming off as sort of slapdash and, in retrospect, premature. As much as I think they should have, 12 Rods did not go on to set the world on fire, but Pitchfork founder Ryan Schreiber puts it in a way that speaks to any college student. To see these normal kids in my town putting out records I loved, playing packed rooms, and getting played on college radio, it was kind of the coolest thing in the world to me. And I don't blame him. It sounds really exciting to be a part of that scene, but we also have to consider the scope of Pitchfork media at this time. Compared to the thousands of albums that were released and subsequently reviewed over the years, this is like finding a diamond in the rough. By virtue of even saying it's a 10, this record is forced to stand shoulder to shoulder with some of the most influential albums in their respective genres. And for as much as I do agree with its score, this review doesn't really make the case that this EP stands out very much. I question how popular this record, this band even, would have been if this review didn't exist at all, because as much as it pains me to say it, chances are they would have been forgotten. So what we have is a situation that represents the internet's influence on music culture not quite being there yet like it would be for groups like Arcade Fire and Broken Social Scene later on. Ironically, both of these bands were helped by Pitchfork, which had grown in stature significantly by that point. If 12 Rod's minimal success was anything to go by, this was a time before getting a high score from them would net you instant notoriety with the indie crowd. Which is a real shame because their best work doomed the band who created it before they even knew it. But things were still looking up for them after V2 Records picked up the band, making them the first American act to be picked up by the UK-based label. They re-released the EP after the initial buzz the band received, and in the summer of 1998, 12 Rod's commercial debut, Split Personalities, was released. In stark contrast to their previous material, this record's production is a lot cleaner, so given this radical change to their sound, let's see what happens when we play the first track. Yep, this is a masterpiece. Right out of the gate, boom, classic, boom, re-recorded version of a classic that actually kind of detracts from the original, only because the much bouncier groove from before is lost. Plus it starts to slow down a bit towards the end. Then, boom, re-recorded version of a classic that significantly adds to the original by slowing it down even more and using that to its advantage. And don't worry, it's not just a rehash. The new songs here continue to push the band's artistic sensibilities. The chemistry and playing between everyone is at an all-time high here. You could really tell during these sessions that they were a highly motivated, creative unit, acting together as one. The 3-track run from Chromatically Declining Me to The Stupidest Boy is probably the most hypnotic this band ever got, with all these pummeling, repeating riffs and distinct musical sections, each with their own jarring transitions. Then we get I Wish You Were a Girl, which takes the cake as the most emotionally resonant song in the 12 Rods catalog, not just because of those thick, heavy shoegaze riffs, but also due to its thematic storytelling. Homophobia and gender norms are incredibly complex topics, so it's a feat that these ideas can be condensed to just this line and have just as much effect on the listener. The mere fact that the protagonist needs to ask this question in the first place to their lover is just, it's so heartbreaking. The lack of understanding as to why this homophobia persists in their own life is harrowing to the point where it leads them to wish their partner was someone else entirely, because that would seem normal to them, and to others. It would make sense. And sonically, this track communicates these complex feelings with intense passion and an unforgettable hook. That's the power of good songwriting right there. All throughout this album, you end up noticing how distinct the chord progressions written by frontman Ryan Alcott are. You can always just tell when he wrote a song, and it's pure fireworks every time. Alright, so this piece of shit, this piece of garbage, alright? This is an album that works best for smiling through a bad day, because shit was royally hitting the fan on the inside. V2 Records desperately needed a hit from these guys, so this one had to sell like crazy. And hey, this time they're gonna work with legendary producer Todd Rundgren. Wow, this is gonna be a surefire hit. Wrong, it sucks. Well, I don't think it sucks. I'm gonna passionately defend this in just a second, but first, let me read off some of the lyrical highlights from the lead single off this thing. What has happened? My ex thinks she's so tough. She flicks her cigarette before she puffs. I think she's a man when she wears Adidas. She lost her libido, then dumped me for a punk. Oh god. So, they had us in the first half, not gonna lie. So yes, this right here, this is very bad. This is going straight into the cringe compilation. 12 Rod's lyrics are always lame, but they were never this lame. Never this in your face about how actively lame it's being. It's probably one of the worst lead singles I've come across, considering what else they could have chosen besides this. For the cherry on top, I'm gonna just gently nudge to the very negative score Pitchfork gave this album, which is actually still up on their website to this day. No, not the gay review, not even the 9.7 they gave the last record. Those two had to be deleted for whatever reason. Yep. So these lyrics, and a couple other really notable ones, are very clearly a downgrade from the song I was analyzing a couple minutes ago. But just because an album has bad lyrics, that doesn't mean you write the whole thing off entirely, okay? Whether we're talking about before or after being purchased by Condé Nast, Pitchfork has always known this. Let's dig a little deeper. There's something else here, and that something is intense power pop bangers with excellent synth work that's best played in the summer. Look, I am a total sucker for that specific sonic palette, regardless of the lyrical content. This is similar to one of those quote-unquote lackluster Weezer records, except like Maladroit, I think this album's actually great, and you should too. Look, sometimes words just aren't enough to describe what's appealing about a song to me. Just listen to a few of these snippets. See what I mean? It's sublime. It's what you come to 12 Rods for. But if you're looking at this critically, that might not be what you remember about this record. You're going to keep thinking about the time he name-dropped Adidas and Korn within 10 seconds of each other. Or that there were a lot of slower cuts in the second half that didn't leave enough of a lasting impression. Like I Think I'm Flying, Rock and Roll Band, or You Gotta Go. And yeah, I'm not crazy about those tracks either, but one of them, Your Secret's Safe With Me, could be described that way, and it was actually revealed to be lead singer Ryan's favorite 12 Rod song. And you know what? I do see where he's coming from with that, so I don't consider this record a total loss. If you're comparing this to their previous output, really ask yourself if any of the energy or passion is lost compositionally, because that's always been the most consistent aspect of their music to me. Think of this as the black sheep in the 12 Rod's catalog. Not the most respected, but it has its fair share of fans, myself included. So the charitable rating of Separation Anxieties was that it didn't do very well. Apart from the critical beatdown it received, nothing about this record translated into success for the band and the label, and in the eyes of the record company, that was the final straw. As a result, 12 Rods were dropped from V2 Records shortly after the album's release, and Chris McGuire, one of the best drummers ever, their drummer, left the band on not super good terms.
So I just got this letter the other day. I'd like to read to you all. Dear Sirs, we regret to inform you that 12 Rods will be released from the V2 record roster due to the following issues. Current 12 Rods music decidedly has no sales potential in today's music market. 3, due to new regulations from the RIAA, a major record label may only host one in parentheses here, bald dude, as a recording artist due to possible public confusion and record sales irregularities. I guess they mean Moby or something. I don't know.
But so what, right? Who needs a label when you have sheer willpower, the passion to create, in the digital age no less? This DIY philosophy is what I love the most about their follow-up, Lost Time, because it is such a stark contrast to the vibe of the previous record to me, where it seemed like the band were looking to please everyone but themselves. As much of a tragic set of circumstances they were left with during their tenure at V2, whether it be because of mismanagement or creative dissatisfaction, this feels refreshing, like a new coat of paint was applied to give it that extra positive sheen. It feels like the record the band always wanted to make, with zero compromises. And it definitely shows in the final product. If I only listened to these 2 records right here, went about my day, and never ended up hearing this, then this video right here would not exist. Straight up. Lost Time made me a 12 Rods fan for life. I am ride or die because of how good this album is. My first tattoo is going to be of this furry little guy on the cover because he is a good boy who deserves nothing but your love and affection. I considered leaving this tangent out of the video entirely, but considering the overwhelming amount of evidence pointing this out now, it's as good a time as any to mention that this was basically car seat headrest before car seat headrest was a thing. That felt dirty coming out of my mouth, I hope you know that. So Lost Time, this fucking beast that changed the course of my life, is about the same length as the Gay EP, and it contains more songs, so you already know the flow from track to track is watertight. Not a single second is wasted on here, to make way for the sheer amount of bangers Ryan and company could think to include here. It is very easy to find yourself repeating this album in its entirety, over and over, for this very reason. I know I sure did. I would just marvel at how something so good could even exist. To the point where I ended up writing an extensive review going in depth on each track. You know, like a normal person. That'll be linked in the description if you'd like to read it for yourself, but if there's one point I'd like to stress here in video format, this is the record that made the band bankrupt. Yeah, no really. It's kinda conflicting, like, should this record exist? It probably shouldn't, let's be honest. For the sake of financial stability, I vote nay. But things played out how they did anyway, and given the massive financial loss, the newly reformed band were just like, yeah, no, and called it quits after their final show in 2004. While that used to be how the story of 12 Rods ends, things have grown to be quite different in the past decade. First, there's Justin Vernon of Bon Iver fame and his label Shigliak? Why you gotta... Anyway, they reissued Lost Time on vinyl and CD in 2015. I actually managed to snag a copy for myself a few years back. It sounds great. He's the artist with the largest profile who sung this band's praises, and he even agrees with me about this album, which gives me hope he's not the only one who's heard about the bird. The bird being 12 Rods.
Ryan, don't!
This news was accompanied by a reunion show performed in March of that same year, where you had every member of the original lineup, including my boy Chris, let's go, playing on each of their respective songs. A format that fits incredibly well given the ethos of this band, and others like it. Like, hey, it took a lot of people's hard work to get to this point, a lot of turmoil, but even if it's just to experience this one night and play for all the fans who've stuck with us over the years, it was all worth it, you know? That, to me, is what makes this a good reunion. You can tell everyone was ecstatic to play with each other again, and it's just a really fun show to watch. The concert was recorded and eventually featured in a Kickstarter-funded documentary about the band called Accidents Waiting to Happen, released in 2017, which the mere existence of still baffles me to no end. Just like with Lost Time, I am so glad we have it, even if the target audience is so small to begin with. But we funded it, damn it, we need this. Well, I didn't, but I would have, I promise. And while I'm very much not a fan of its structure, having to skip the live portions to get to the informative parts, it is instrumental in understanding the full story of what happened to this band and how it affected each of the band members. If you are at all curious, from one fan to potentially another, I highly recommend giving it a watch. There's also been a recent spike of newfound interest in 12 Rods, particularly on sites like Rate Your Music, where a good few thousand people discovered the band and have at least brought them out of obscurity over there. So you can imagine their shock when Ryan, out of the blue, announced on Facebook that there would be a brand new 12 Rods album, the first in over 20 years, and it was going to be recorded entirely solo. Naturally, this was a big deal. and it was right after I had gotten into them, so it felt extra meaningful. And while yes, none of the original members would be in this incarnation of the band, music is something that people move on from all the time, whether it be to focus on family or other things, which is exactly what happened here. It would be legitimately surprising to me if it were the other way around. A lot can change in 21 years, hell, even 8, and this is no exception. Now, we gotta talk about comeback records because the vast majority of them operate under 2, let's say 3 extremes. Sometimes a band picks up where they left off pretty well, ultimately satisfying fans with a natural extension of their sound. These aren't necessarily slumps, but they don't challenge the audience as much, and in most cases, how could you ever expect them to? You also have the obvious exceptions, and I do mean exceptions, that arguably improve upon things in a refreshing light. Then you have those disasters where fans are left questioning whether they even wanted this to begin with. In the case of If We Stayed Alive, you have a lot of elephants each in their own respective rooms, whether it be the scant 24-minute runtime, the fact that these were all re-recorded demos written before Lost Time, which doesn't exactly fill me with the most confidence, like, this was material previously considered not good enough to be on an album, now you expect me to believe they're hidden gems that are ushering in a new era of 12 Rods altogether? Okay, given the knowledge of all these things in advance, it's easy for all of this to work against the album. At least I thought this, until that first single dropped. My year, parentheses, this is gonna be. And I replayed it at least 20 times in a row that day. 12 Rods yet again proved me wrong, and my curiosity was fully rewarded with a lush banger about powering through a tough time. I just love the sentiment of clenching your fists and going, whatever you throw at me, I'm determined to make this my year, whatever it takes. It's a very can-do attitude that I vibe with very heavily. It also finds Ryan looking into the past, incredibly fitting given how long it's been, but also for songwriting nerds like me, who can't help but make that direct connection to the artist. There's more to it than what's on the surface, and that's what the best 12 Rod songs managed to do for me. The recording quality certainly leaves a lot to be desired, but that's not surprising given it was recorded on 4-track in a basement. I'm beginning to get a sense of deja vu, and I'm not sure why. I'm not saying that it's on par. Sonically, this song is begging for a better engineer, but at worst, it's kind of muffled, obscuring the performance a bit. Regardless of these relatively minor gripes, it's a success. This track, along with the other 2 singles that followed, confirmed that the material was solid enough to warrant more 12 Rods, in this day and age. There's a lot of distinct chord changes in these ones too. Ryan's ear for what sounds good has always been his greatest strength. Melodies go up and down like a fucking raft in a ravine, yet they never feel out of place or unconventional. And I should clarify that these songs don't feel like just demos. They're developed enough to act as a natural extension of what would have been the follow-up to Lost Time. Play them on the radio, or TikTok, or wherever else is convenient. Because yes, the new album is good. Really good. I have a lot of positive things to say about it, but principally, it is also the least essential record in their catalog, apart from this thing, which it's really only ever on par with, in my opinion. And that makes sense. For a discography as consistent as this, you would be crazy to try and top stuff like this, on your own. But for as much praise as I've given, this doesn't quite leave me satisfied. In order to really convince me that 12 Rods is going to continue from here on out, I need to hear what a song written in current year would sound like. That is something I can't stop thinking about when listening to this record. I mean, you've already done half the work, I know you can perform these older cuts just fine, and they sound great, but without sounding mean, it's worth asking if they were all that you had left. I would hope this is answered on whatever awaits us next, because I'm left genuinely curious as to what that would sound like. I should add that the subject of touring in a brand new lineup were reassuring to their fans over in Minneapolis. And they do plan on touring this year, so if you have the opportunity, please go and see them. Not everyone realizes this, but being a full-time musician, making a steady income consistently, that is nearly impossible for the vast majority of those even considering it as a full-time career. You can't do it for the money anymore, and if you don't have a backup plan, you will eventually find out why. But here's the thing about all that. No matter how slim those odds are, I don't think that's ever fully convinced Ryan and others like him to stop pursuing their dreams. He views being a musician not as a career or a hobby, but as an assignment. And this speaks to how committed he really is. I have to assume either the fear of becoming a has-been, or already having been labeled one, was partial incentive enough to put himself out there again, to test the waters and see what this new emerging fan base would do with more music. The Rate Your Music crowd may not be a smart financial incentive. Seriously, do not pander to these people. But it is a platform where one's efforts have greater potential to be widely recognized, praised by people who never leave their bedrooms. It's a niche that has been gaining more and more sway as social isolation is much more common. And as cheesy as it is for me to say, that kind of honest appreciation, however small or ineffective it may seem, is invaluable. It's worth more than any amount of money in the world. If this band has proven anything over its extensive history, it's that the desire to create something despite immense pushback is admirable. Sharing a part of yourself is ultimately a sacrifice, and it's one that can backfire in all sorts of weird ways. But despite that, your talent will never be overlooked. It will be cherished by somebody, even if it's just by one person. Sometimes a good story defines a band. There are plenty of people who only know them as the first Pitchfork 10 and moved on from there. But 12 Rods was never going to be for those people anyway. Their small yet enduring legacy is a testament to how far a band will go to prove themselves to those who do care enough. And if there's one thing I hope this video accomplishes, it's to spread the word about my favorite band. While there's still time, you know?